Hello, my name is Alexia Velakazaka, and in today's podcast, I would like to talk a bit about the impact of project developments that look to regenerate and transform an existing space. I think two very interesting case studies would be one in London, the King's Cross redevelopment, and looking at the other side of the road with a kind of similar outlook, the Cidade Matarazzo development in São Paulo City in Brazil, that look to regenerate an area in decline but also that aim to preserve the cultural and historical background of the space. Interesting enough, they also wanted to create a kind of private public space that would create luxury homes and shopping destinations while also making it accessible to the larger public, leading us to the question what makes a development inclusive, and how private developments have the power to transform a public space. First, starting off with an interview with architecture student Hania Lee, who attends Centro St. Martin's and who works and studies in King's Cross on a daily basis. Welcome, Honey, and thank you for meeting me today. So, to start off, I'd like to ask you a first couple of questions. As a local student and worker that frequents the area, what are your opinions on the accessibility of King's Cross for users in a daily basis?
So since my first term, I've realised there's so many different people using the space at once. So for instance, I'm a student, so I often commute to CSM on a regular basis. But as well as that, just on my way to uni and the first part of development, there's many people who go there for work. So there's Google firms, but there's also a variety of restaurants and workers come in the morning. But I feel with accessibility, it's a beautiful place to work and study. I come here on the weekends as well to work. But yeah, the space is incredibly different from different parts of London as well. It has a beautiful blend of not only the shopping area, but the central part where there's a campus. But yeah.
Would you say that you participate in events and activities of the space? Aside from working and study, which you mentioned that, but going to restaurants in Coldrop's Yard or going to further markets and cultural events that they advertise, such as the Canopy Market.
In terms of participation, I feel my uni life and also my leisure is very intertwined. For example, when it comes to the Canopy Market, if I was going to go there for fun, it'd be basically because I was already there because of me being on campus. But in terms of what I do outside of university, there are a few events that I've participated in that are linked to my work. So in the summer they have this massive table where all the workers come out in the sun, we eat together. However, unfortunately, when it comes to leisure, I'd love to shop here in my free time. However, a student on a budget, you'd have to have a lot of disposable income to comfortably just spend whatever you want to spend. So yeah, there's a conflict of just having fun and wanting to spend, but unfortunately with many of not only my circumstance but many people who do study, we can't just come here for leisure.
So ultimately, would you say that this space, particularly the shopping spaces in King's Cross, are inclusive, or how could they possibly be more inclusive, if you have any opinions as also an architecture student?
I feel unfortunately the space is very not inclusive. There's only a certain type of person who can come in and spend money. You'd have to have a very high income. And in terms of the ways that they can change that is trying to have some sort of affordable shops scattered around, instead of certain shops are COS cause, or where I work where you'd have to spend so much money. But also it's the way they advertise the space and how they advertise it that will hopefully change in the future. And as well as that, terms of like inclusivity, there's not much affordable housing in King's Cross either. Like there are lots of private investors who say that 50% of like their housing is going to be affordable, but when you really look into it, like the affordability is like not accurate, and many of the average person working as like a teacher or like anyone who's just working normally in like any tertiary job won't be able to afford these quote unquote affordable homes. So in order to change like the inclusivity of the space, you have to change the demographic, and the demographic currently here is that people from high income like high income like houses and stuff like that. So in order to change that, you'd have to create this trickle down effect that starts from the top to the bottom. So in order to change that, it's just change people who live here, but also finding a mix and balance between the two is very important to do so as well.
Now looking at our second case study in Brazil, Cidade de Matarazzo. Like King's Cross, its redevelopment is part of a movement to renovate an abandoned area. So, what was once Hospital Matarazzo has been renovated to become an oasis of city perks in one place, bringing shopping, dining, and hotel experience in a new architectural hub. As a former resident of São Paulo, I feel I can argue that though its intentions of renovation are exciting for the city, unlike London, the huge social gaps can overshadow the public aspect of this project. The majority of the Brazilian population comes from very low income and have not been previously presented to spaces like this. We can already see that partly because of how the city's economy is distributed geographically. Particularly, the area of Cidade Matarazzo is built on an upper-class space, and it is unlikely that people from other backgrounds would travel to a space in which they couldn't afford the private activities taking place, and the public spaces would mostly consist of an area to interact rather to actually do something. So instead of offering inclusivity, it would highlight the huge economic inequality that exists. It is, however, important to take the initiative to bring these concepts to countries like Brazil. I would say that to do this in an effective manner would be to tone down the luxurious components of the private units and possibly build them in gray areas of the city, like the neighborhood of Vila Madalena, which, even though is a richer area of São Paulo as well, it's an up-and-coming neighborhood for young families and students. This would introduce a small step in inclusive private spaces, whilst also allowing for a wider public to have a reason to visit the public amenity. So what I can take from the comparison between two similar project briefs in very different cities is that private developments are inclusive for the public, not because of the brief itself, but because of the city in which it was built on. So, how was the city's economy before it was built? What are the geopolitical scenarios and values of the city? These are all questions that need to be taken in consideration